Frank's Red Hot is the perfect blend of flavor and heat, so you can use an entire bottle to make recipes like buffalo chicken dip or buffalo nachos, or even things that don't start with buffalo. Frank's Red Hot, I put that on everything.
Craig.
Feel the power of the wazoo mullet, tremble and cower from the wazoo mullet. White metal burn of the wazoo mullet. Come straight up perm, it's a wazoo mullet.
Oh my God, Craig!
That was just for you, buddy.
That was just for me. The people don't know this. Should I explain?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, welcome to Podcast versus Everyone. That's the part Craig normally does.
Oh yeah, welcome to Podcast versus Everyone. I'm Craig Powers. With me is Jeff Newser, who's going to tell you what the hell that song was all about.
Yeah. And we are, by the way, you can probably tell from the quality of the audio, we are back to recording from separate locations, as I am in HQ East from the basement of my house, and Craig is in HQ West from, I don't know, your living room, your office.
Yeah, my office.
My office. So that song. So people who have seen pictures of us when we're recording live together on my computer, there's a sticker that says FIF, which is for a band named Five Iron Frenzy, and they have a song called The Phantom Mullet, and Craig just went on a riff with the Phantom Mullet for Liam Ryan and Craig. I don't know that I've ever been more I don't know that I've ever felt more affection for you as a friend than I do right now.
Yeah. Sorry I couldn't do like the pop punk voice, but that's just
it was
too
really
much.
good. That was really good though. Like I knew it right away what that was. And I'm beaming over here at HQ East.
Well, truly, I looked for songs about mullets, and then I saw Five Iron Frenzy, and I was like, got to do that one. It is the
best song for sure. It's not even close. Not even close. Well, hey, how's it going?
Good. Are you drinking anything?
I am. So should we talk beer before we start talking the non-news day that is the Pac-12 media day?
Yeah, let's do that.
Unnews. All right, so since I am day drinking, so people don't know this, but it is about 3:30 on Wednesday afternoon. So that means we're day drinking. So for day drinking today, I picked up a Crux Citrus Cladlands, which is a grisette ale, and I believe you've talked about grisettes before. And this one is a nice hearty 3.7% alcohol, which makes it I know, right? I better be careful here, but does make it a sort of a perfect day drinking beer. So yeah, it's good. It's funny. So I don't remember exactly what you said about grisettes before, but it's kind of both citrusy and weedy, and it's interesting. It's interesting. So yeah, I dig it.
So yeah, a grisette is like a light wheat saison, essentially.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. So it's good. I like it. Good little midday beer.
All right. Out of 5 mullets, what would you give that beer?
This is like 3.5 mullets. Like, it's good. I would drink it again. It's not great, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes
but
sense.
It's good. Like, for what it is, like, like a light, easy drinking, like I said, daytime beer. It'd be really good, like, sitting next to the pool on a nice hot day, and those kinds of beers they do have value.
They absolutely do. I'm actually I'm going to Tacoma Defiance game this evening, and we have these tickets where you're like on a party deck, and it comes with like unlimited Coors Light essentially. So I'm not going to turn it down, and that's even, I think, it's coming in right around on alcohol wise what you're drinking.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be putting back a few of those because hey, they came with the ticket, and I'm not one to turn that down. I'm not gonna go spend $9 on a beer when I can just free one. Yeah.
Yeah. You are going to be making about 28 trips to the bathroom though.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I got to stay hydrated, and Coors Light will do that for you.
That is true.
Excellent.
That is true. What about you? What are you drinking?
So, you were over at my house on Saturday. I
I
had a bit of
was.
my family was out of town. I had a beer share, just with a few, no, not a big one, but just a few people. Um, One of my friends that came over was, she works at Pine Defiance. Her name is Sarah. It's a beer bar in Tacoma. Um, and she actually brought over a couple beers that she was like, "These are for you. We're not going to share these. These are just for you." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." One of them is, both were from Vermont. She knows I used to live in Vermont, so she apparently had picked up a couple beers from Vermont. But one of them is from Foam Brewers. Foam Brewers is in Burlington, Vermont, which is the largest city in Vermont, which means that it has 45,000 people in it. But it's a fairly it's a cool college town. I love living there. It's very walkable, and they have their downtown is, Burlington's downtown is designed by the same person who designed Pearl Street in Boulder. So it's pedestrian friendly and all this stuff. But Foam Brewers, it actually came about after I lived in Vermont. So they're a pretty new brewery, but they're right down on the waterfront in Burlington. They have a great location. I've actually been back there when I went back for a wedding a couple of years ago, and they had a great, really cool tap room. It's designed by the same guy that apparently designs the Fish concert sets. So Fish is obviously a band from Vermont, with one of those bands with very obsessive fans, and
Yes.
very sort of unique thing. I never met so many like Fish heads as I did when I was in Vermont. I had a lot of people who moved there because of Fish. So, or I had a lot of I had friends that were, kind of loved Vermont because of Fish. But anyway, so this beer, so Foam, they do kind of like that standard new brewery game, is a lot of hazy IPAs, some pilsners, some sours. They'll barrel age some things. So they do kind of the the trendy beers, and one of the and this one particular one is a hazy double IPA, and it is called Youth Lagoon, which if you just look at the label, and I'll tweet out a picture of it at some point, but if you look at the label, it's really hard to figure out what the beer is called. And on the side, like, once you kind of look at it, you kind of figure out, oh, though, there's the letters. It's made by an artist called, and I looked it up on Instagram, by an artist called Will Gibbard. And if you look him up on Instagram, at WILL_GEBHARD, it's definitely fits with his aesthetic. But the funny thing is, I was trying to figure out what this beer was, and on the side it says Burlington, Vermont, keep cold, drink fresh, time kills art. So what I noticed, so I searched time kills art, and I noticed that a lot of people, like, there's actually a beer on Untapped and in Beer Advocate with this same can art that people have put in as time kills art, because they obviously could not figure out what the label said that it was called Youth Lagoon. The reason I figured it out, because this had very few, the time kills art had very few check-ins, which didn't make sense to me. I only had like 20, and with an IPA and with an IPA that was released about a month ago, like, it should have more than 20 check-ins. So I just went on Foam's Instagram until I could find the beer, and saw it was called Youth Lagoon. And I scrolled through. It seems they release it about every 2 months. And it's just, your hazy IPA with like your kind of tropical fruit flavors. The foam beers I've had before probably had a little more body, the hazy IPA. So this is probably more like a Northwest, like you could probably close your eyes and think this was like a Skookum beer or something like that. So it's definitely got a little bit more bitterness, and it's funny. I was reading some of the Untapped reviews, and some of the Haze Bros were complaining about that, but it still has pretty good ratings overall, and it's very solid. It's got a great nose on it, very fruity, tropical fruit. It's nice. I love the grapefruit in there, and a little bit of a bitter backbone, not a ton. It's got a nice resinous feel to it. But yeah, so all in all, very good beer. I'll give it 4 out of 5 mullets. I highly recommend, if you're ever in Burlington, Vermont, for whatever reason, to check them out. It's a really cool tap room. They are called Foam Brewing, so they live up to that name. When they pour their beer in their tap room, it's got a little like extra head on everything, and like they do something when they pour it so that you get this like really nice thick layer of head on there. So every beer you get does have this foam on the top. So it's pretty cool. That's pretty consistent too. So there must be something they do with the CO2 or something. But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool brewery. If it had existed when I lived in Burlington, which I would have been able to walk there in about 15 minutes, I probably would have spent a ton of money and time there. So I'm not sure if it's good or bad, since considering I was in grad school and didn't have a lot of money. I'm not sure if it's good or bad that it was not there when I was there.
Yeah, probably good.
Probably good. But yeah, so that's what we're drinking, man. But let's talk about some nonsense. I feel like it's time to talk about nonsense.
Yeah, nonsense. I mean, it's Pac-12 Media Day, singular, one day this year, right? As opposed to multiple days they've done in the past few years.
Thank the media gods.
Yeah, and it's funny because like there were people like, hey man, typical Pac-12, like everybody else is doing 2 days and you're only doing one, and I'm like, people, like do you really need 2 days? Like what? I mean, I guess maybe for the SEC and the ACC who have 14 teams. Does the Big Ten also have 14 teams?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So if you've got 14 teams, maybe, but man,
16 or no 14.
No 14. Nobody's gotten 16 yet. We could talk about that on another podcast, but the whole 16 team thing that we almost had, or seemingly almost had, but
they have 2 affiliate members. That's why that I was thinking, but yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, it's just, maybe I could see with 14 teams, you'd be like, yeah, it's just necessary to split into 2 days. But as someone who I've never been down to Media Day, or Media Days, but as someone who has covered them every summer for the last like 11 years from afar, I can say with a high degree of confidence that there is absolutely no point to having a 2-day media, bonanza on these things. There's just not enough. I mean, there's not enough to say. There's not enough to do. I mean, it's just whatever the last couple of years, the Pac-12 sort of filled those secondary days with, basically like they would have the players play games or something.
Yeah.
I mean, they would just like, they would just, kind of like you put it earlier. I mean, it was just nonsense. They would have the players do nonsense. So, in lieu of that kind of garbage, filling up the time instead, we just, like they do a little quick car wash where, the coach and the players appear on TV. The players do a little media session. The coach does a little media session at the podium, and then, you get on with it. So, and the players, I know there's a bunch of other stuff too that goes on maybe a lot of fans don't know about, but, the players get their pictures taken. They shoot promos for Pac-12 Network, stuff like that. So whenever you're watching Pac-12 Network and, they get a player on who says, it's October and, Peyton Pallure comes on your screen and is like, you're watching Pac-12 Network, home of the Washington State Cougars. Well, they record all that garbage down at, Media Day. So anyway, it's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think they did a lot of that stuff yesterday when the players got there and, so just 1 day is fine. Just get it over with because frankly, very little of substance comes out of the day anyway.
Yeah, I definitely saw on Instagram, you saw the 2 players that are down there, Liam Ryan and Jihad Woods, and you saw them in kind of full pads and uniforms. They had them in the all crimson, which was an interesting choice. So probably just looks best on the promos or something. Probably. But yeah, so. Yeah, you saw them recording those promos and stuff, and obviously it's going to be great all year watching Liam Ryan with that mullet in that promo. It's going to be excellent.
Yeah, I predicted yesterday that the number one storyline for WSU out of Media Day would be their hair between Jahad Woods and Liam Ryan. And I wasn't wrong. That was
Yahoo
yeah.
ran a national story on it.
Yep. ran a national story on Liam Ryan's mullet. So, good for him. We had the mustache last year. We've got the mullet this year. The only thing we're really missing is the mullet with the mustache.
Yeah. So during the Pac-12 media, obviously, so both of you and I were trying to, catch some of it. And there was a problem with the stream. So when they actually had the press conference with Mike Leach, that was not seen. But they did. Mike Yam and Yogi Roth were doing these kind of 15-minute sit-down interviews with the coaches and players. WSU was unique in that they had Leach and the players at the same time.
Yeah, that would explain why they didn't have a fifth mic, and Woods and Ryan were passing the microphone back and forth, which I thought was hilariously terrible.
From our podcast last week with Flat Steak, we know that's very difficult.
Yes, but we also don't have tens of millions of dollars in our budget either. So
yep. Yeah. So
anyway,
forgive us.
Yeah.
But yeah. So they didn't have enough mics. In that was as I said to you, a whole lot of nothing. Probably my favorite part was that Leach called Liam Ryan's mullet a millennial mullet, which kind of fits because he's got those kind of shaved sides. And that's kind of the millennial haircut that I have it myself with the kind of shaved cut down sides with the longer top, and then he's got the mullet coming out of it. So it's definitely a modernized mullet, but it is very much a mullet. And
according to Yahoo, he also let the soccer team bleach it, which always a good idea to let girls do that for you.
Oh yeah.
It's a great way to be like, oh yeah, sure, girls, you can bleach my hair, and there you go.
And it pretty much never works out the way you think it's
No, it doesn't. But that's sort of part of the charm of this mullet is that it's pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Which is what makes it great. So I'm down with that.
So non-mullet stuff from that interview, it was a whole lot of nothing, as I said. I'll pull up my notes, which were
as they typically are.
Pretty much nothing. My note. They asked about Roth and Yam asked about the quarterback battle, and so they asked Liam what he thought, and he's like, well, I haven't really worked with them because they've been doing 7-on-7 drills, and the offensive linemen aren't there.
Right.
So actually, Jahad Woods has worked with them. And, of course, he just said, like, they're all good. That's up to Leach, And so what Leach said is, and more very important things. The biggest thing is who can move the offense most effectively. He talked about leadership as well, but that was my favorite line. The guy who can move the offense most effectively. But actually, the one thing that was mildly interesting is that he said, we do need to select a guy and invest the reps or else we'll successfully make everybody average. So I'm guessing around, like, by the time fall camp starts, we'll be able to see who they've picked as the number one guy, if that's Leach's state of mind regarding that.
Well, if we look back to last year, if I remember right, it took a good couple of weeks before Minshew started to sort of separate himself, and we started to kind of see that's who it was going to be.
It wasn't very obvious. We kind of guessed it would be him, but it wasn't obvious.
Yeah, we did a little bit of, the reading of the tea leaves in terms of, what Leach was saying and kind of what the reports were coming out of practice. And I think that I think just the simple axiom, I don't know if it's an axiom, but just the simple logic applies that, if you've recruited a grad transfer, you probably recruited him for a reason. Right. So,
right.
I think there's all that. If I remember right last year, I think Minshew was sort of cemented as the number one guy with about 2 weeks to go into Wyoming, if I remember right. I could be wrong on that, but that seems about right in my head. 2 weeks of really leading, getting the majority of the reps, those kinds of things, all seem to be, that's what it seemed to be, if I remember right. So that gives us, a couple of weeks of, who's doing what. I really do think it's gonna, I think Gabrut is the leader just because of what I just said. And we've talked about this on the show before. But I do think it's going to come down to him and Gordon, and, I think with a couple weeks to go, then they'll be able to really narrow it down and really kind of focus in on Gabrut, who, again, I've said before, I'd be fairly shocked if he's not the guy. So,
yeah, we've spent a lot of time talking about the quarterback situation on this podcast, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again in a couple weeks. So probably don't need to dive.
And again,
that.
A couple weeks after that.
Yeah. So, I know you and I have both kind of skimmed and read over the transcript obviously because we couldn't see it. It was the Pac-12 media capabilities could not broadcast Mike Leach's press conference to us. Oh
my God! Can we talk about that for just a second? Just the disaster of Pac-12 network. Okay, so we're watching this, right? And so, like we said, there was the TV interview portion, and then the actual podium time, which is where all the reporters who have traveled there get to ask their questions, and that's partly why there's not a lot of interesting things that get said by Leach during that podium time, is because that's the time when all these the reason for media day, really, other than to promote the conference, the main reason why it exists in the first place is simply because, all of these reporters come to one place, all the coaches are there, a whole bunch of players are there, and they ask questions that they will use for stories all year long. So they're not just writing stories about the media day. They are getting information that, so like when, I don't know, like when WSU plays, we play UCLA this year, right? When WSU plays UCLA, the LA Times guy will ask, well, okay, here's a perfect example. The Colorado reporter asked Leach about Laviska Shenault. And it's like, well, why? You know what I mean? Well, because he needs information for a story on Laviska Shenault, right? It'll probably be used later, whatever. Okay. So that's why these interviews are sort of not all that informative, especially for fans of the team, because they're not, most of the questions aren't coming from guys who cover the Cougars. So, okay. So the TV portion, they do 15 minutes. So about, 5 minutes or so into the TV portion, some random music starts up.
Yeah, the Pac-12 go into commercial music.
Right, go into commercial music, and then it disappears, right, during somebody's answer. Okay, great. Good job, Pac-12. And then about, 30 seconds after that, 60 seconds after that, the sound cuts out. And I believe the picture even froze for a few seconds, but the ticker was still moving, which is how I knew it wasn't my stream that was frozen. And then the mouth started moving again, but there was no sound. And then the sound came back. So there was that. And then about, a minute after that, somebody, I think it was Leach, was in the middle of a response, and then it just cut off and they went to commercial. So that happened. Then they came back from commercial as if nothing had happened. Right. And I'm like, are they starting the interview over? Are they just continuing? They didn't even acknowledge that what had happened before, had even happened. Right. Let's just pretend nothing happened. So then they finish out the interview, and I'm looking over, and there's the live stream for the podium session. And I'm like, okay, that's what I actually want to watch, because that's where, again, the reporters ask, semi-interesting questions, and maybe you get some nuggets of information. For about 40 minutes while I had it on, it said, something like press conference upcoming. And it just sat there, and I knew they were doing, interviews with coaches at that point. And then I went back to Pac12.com. They had taken that link down off their website, and I'm like, well, shoot. So the whole Mike Leach podium time didn't get streamed, so I didn't get any of that. And then about 20 minutes after that, the stream starts up, and guess who's on my stream?
Chris Petersen.
Oh, How lovely to get my stream up and running just in time for Chris Petersen to say something stupid, which I guess we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, I just it was just so very Pac-12 network. And I think somebody who responded to some of my tweets about it said, that he doesn't believe there's a conspiracy against WSU, but it's stuff like that that makes him think, well, I can kind of understand why some people do. And I'm like, yeah.
So thankfully, asapsports.com.
Thank God for ASAP Sports.
Provides transcriptions of these interviews or these media sessions. So we actually have everything that Leach said, provided they took it down correctly, which I'm sure they did. So we have interviews we have all the words. So you've read through that. What did you find? What nuggets did you find most interesting?
The one response that I found the most interesting, they're the ones where Leach wants to expand, and not on things like where's a good place for a first date, but stuff like football related things. He had a cool response to somebody asked about running an air raid offense. And he kind of went into this thing. He says, well, I think there's several branches. Well, the question was, is it a West Coast thing to still run an air raid offense? And Leach said, well, I think there's several branches. It's funny. You get these offenses. It always seems like the run and shoot was the most aggressive with it. It was like a religion. Some of these people act like these offenses are religions. It's not the true run and shoot. You didn't do it like the true run and shoot. Did they get a first down? Did they score? Who cares? They did the same thing with the West Coast offense. And he talks about, he says, it's like, obviously that's ridiculous. He said some things called the West Coast offense nowadays has Bill Walsh rolling over in his grave. I promise you, so basically he just said, as far as the air raid, I've always visualized the air raid, and I gave it the name when Bob Lamb came walking through with that siren. But I mean, just spread it out, attack the whole field, get it in everybody's hands. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can even effectively do it on the ground. Chip Kelly style is some of that. You need to have some core beliefs on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Otherwise, you're just a mishmash of concepts. So I think when it's just interesting because he's just like, you know what you're good at, you repeat it, and the philosophy is we're going to spread the field and we're going to have lots of people touch the ball. And it's just that for Leach, that philosophy plus the set, sort of the set of plays that he's chosen to do that, form the air raid. And he's just like, whatever it is basically he's sort of interesting in that he says, there's more than one way to get there. He says, there's no true air raid, at least not the way I see it, not the way I've been involved with it. You're just trying to move the ball. I don't think there's a true anything. And he says, I'm not real dogmatic about this is the air raid and this isn't. So I don't know. I love answers like that because they're the sort of thing that give a little insight into his way of thinking. And so those kinds of answers are pretty fun. I think the rest of it's pretty whatever, kind of take it or leave it. But, I think he said we need to keep improving about 22 different times during this, which, he always says, and, he's always going to be on message with, particularly with stuff that might get back to his players. Yeah.
There was really only one attempt to get a Leach answer. And that was have you had a chance to walk down Hollywood Boulevard before?
Yeah.
Interesting part to me was he says, if you haven't eaten at Musso and Frank's, go eat there. First of all, they have every menu item you could ever possibly conceive of, which, man, when I know I want to go to a restaurant and think it's going to be good is when the menu is so big that they just have everything you could think of.
Like going to the Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah. Well, why go get one thing? Why to go to a restaurant that does one thing really well when you could just have a restaurant that does everything kind of shitty? What? Why not?
Yeah. Like everything. Let's do, or maybe even everything's above average. I mean, yay. I don't know though. It's reminds me of when I was a kid and my grandparents used to always take us to the Old Country buffet because everybody gets a little bit of something that they like.
Well, yeah, with kids, it's a whole different thing now. You gotta be like, please just have the one thing my kid will eat. And we're already getting into that with B, that it's just
well, good news for you. Good news for you. Just about every place on the planet has chicken strips.
Yep. And she loves those. So that's all that matters.
That's right.
But yeah, so I didn't put this in the itinerary, but I kind of forgot to. But so WSU was picked fourth in the Pac-12 North.
Yeah,
which is kind of where they're typically slotted. Fourth or fifth is where they usually are in the predictions. I think 2016 was probably or 2017 was probably the only exception. I think they got up to third that year.
They did,
and that was the year they actually finished that in third. But yeah, so fourth, they got one first place vote, and I'd love to find out who that is.
I would too.
And that person actually picked them to win the Pac-12 title game too. So
yeah.
So I like that person. I want them to be right. I so very want them to be right.
I think if I was so first of all, I mean, let me throw it back to you for a sec. If you were picking the Pac-12 North, where would you slot WSU?
I mean, I'd probably slot them third.
That's what I would too. Ahead of Stanford?
Ahead of Stanford. I see no reason why Stanford, I mean, other than it being Stanford and us being WSU, why Stanford would be above WSU.
Okay, so if I'm thinking why that is, my guess would be it's the quarterback.
Yep.
Right. So people think, and people like Costello for some reason, and people don't know what WSU has coming. Which, so then to kind of flip it back around, here's my reason. So like just like you, I would probably slot us behind Oregon. Well, I don't know. Like I have a real issue with people who love Oregon so much. Like
I do too, but I also.
I mean, I get it,
but here's just the fact that WSU goes to Oregon, that might, and I still think WSU can beat Oregon at Oregon, but that might.
I mean, we've done it the last two times.
Yeah. Well, and here's the funny thing to me is a lot of the Oregon hype is built around their recruiting class.
Yeah.
But those are all freshmen.
Right.
Like I don't like it. So
and Herbert.
But I am buying into that hype, and honestly, I can talk myself into second now, because I mean, what has Justin Herbert honestly done to like deserve this like hype that he gets? I don't get it.
He occasionally makes some really good throws.
Yeah, he definitely
he's a
has
physical specimen.
Yes.
And the NFL obviously thinks he's, a future top 5 pick, right? So I mean, so there's that. But I just it's sort of bananas to me how sort of deeply ingrained these ideas about programs get. I mean, let's just throw out there for a sec. 2 people picked USC to win the South, and those 2 people also picked USC to win the Pac-12 championship. Like, on what planet can you, like, on with any kind of intellectual integrity, pick USC to win anything, right? Other than, well, the team's loaded with 4- and 5-star guys, so maybe they'll figure it out. Other than the fact they have probably the worst coach in the conference. So
almost certainly do.
Like almost, well, we don't know whether Mel Tucker's any good. So
yeah.
Fine.
Well, yeah, we don't know if he's good, but the coaches are pretty stacked right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm thinking, okay, who's the
best?
Like,
what the hell are you doing having Clay Helton as your coach?
It's absolutely bizarre. So anyway, it's these things, like, people make these decisions, these picks based off of, okay, who's coming back, who's the quarterback, and what's the program prestige and recruiting, right? I mean, it's basically what Bill Connolly puts to his projections for S&P. He just puts numbers on all those things, right? How many people are coming back? Which guys are coming back? Is it the quarterback that's more important? Whatever. What's your recruiting been for the last 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, but you go look, I mean, and I understand every year is its own year. And in fact, I kind of made fun of, John Wilner for this, because John Wilner picked Stanford. What did he pick him, second or something like that? I don't remember. Yes. But anyway.
And he basically just said because it's Stanford.
Because something. Every other year when they have Oregon and Washington at home, they've finished first. And this happened like the last, 3 times. The 3 last odd years, right? 17, 15, and 13. And I'm like, Like, okay, he believes very strongly in the schedule stuff, playing home versus road, which I don't believe quite as strongly in it as he does. But at any rate, it's just sort of like, I look at this and I go, okay, I could see a toss up between Oregon, Washington, and Wazoo, right? Because if you look at the Cougs, like, I don't see any reason why they would have to take a massive step back. Now, they won a bunch of one possession games last year. I get it that they may not win all, if they play at the same level, they may not have the same record simply because of that. I get that their schedule is a little tougher. They got to play at Utah. They got to play at Oregon, right? Okay. They got to play at Washington. Okay, fine. But it's like, have they not proven that they can do this, right? Have they not proven that going to Utah is not a problem? Have they not proven that going to Oregon's not that big of a deal? Like I'm not sure why that becomes such a thing. And, so when I look at Stanford and I go, okay, great. KJ Costello was pretty good last year, except like how many times, how much of that production is just throwing the ball up, 6 feet 9 inches into the air where JJ Arcega-Whiteside can only catch it, and he's missing his top tight end. And I mean, just like, I don't know, man, I'm not convinced he's actually that good. And I could be wrong, but I don't know, man. I got to think that I got to see it before I'll believe that he wasn't a pretty significant product of the weapons around him.
Well, and yeah. And then when you talk about WSU, like it's not that hard to figure out why people are like, it's hard to pick them to win these games. Cause even from our perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, you look at Oregon, at Utah, games like that, and you're like objectively, I'm like, no, we're not going to win those games. But the last 4 years, it's just like, there's only one game where you're like, no, we're not going to win that game. And so that will always be an L for me. Like, we'll probably do the predictions in a couple of weeks. But now with WSU, it's just like, you just kind of have to believe in the system. And they're like,
right,
they're going to win more games than we think they are. They always are. There hasn't been a year in the last 4 years since since Grinch came along, since the defense has been better, and since Leach has kind of gotten the air raid in there with consistency and with better receivers, that where it's like they don't win more than you think they're going to win. So if you think they're going to win 7 this year, they'll probably win 9. So I don't, it's like I don't.
Well, and that's what sort of cracks me up about this whole exercise is that logic seems to apply to everyone else except Wazoo when these things are being picked, which is sort of funny to me. Like, and again, I'm not one of those people who's like, the media has it out for us. Like that's not me at all. But I'm also just sort of like, okay, you've got this track record of Mike Leach teams. I mean, I remember reading Bill, referencing Bill Connolly again, who used to write for SB Nation, now writes for ESPN.
Congrats, Bill.
Yeah, congrats, Bill, if you listen to our podcast. I remember he wrote his preview last year, so for 2018. And that was when we were all just like, I shouldn't say all, but many of us, me, most particularly, right, we're pretty down. We were like, look, man, there's all that, they've lost all this talent and the quarterback died, and it's like all this stuff, all these reasons why they should take a step back and win significantly fewer games than they had been winning. And Bill Connolly writes his preview that says basically, nope, they're going to be this good because it's Mike Leach and that's what he does. And there you go. And I'm just like, you know what? And look, people who listen to this also know, or followed Cougs Center for a long time also know, you and I are very statistically inclined. We're very analytical. Like, we love numbers. And even I was sort of like, hey, nerd, you might want to step away from the spreadsheet for a minute and kind of see the reality of what, what has gone on with this team. Right. And then lo and behold, I mean, not that anybody, thought 11 wins was going to be a thing, but it's like, you look at it and you go, yeah, they were exactly what Bill Connolly said they would be. They were, you plug in a new quarterback and the offense is awesome and the defense was okay. And, voila, you're 7-2 in the Pac-12 North, tied for first and heading to the Alamo Bowl. It's like, I mean, it's funny that people look at Stanford and go, well, David Shaw is such a great coach and da 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 da. And I'm just like, but we've beaten them 4 years in a row. Well, Oregon, they've whatever. Well, when has Oregon, when was the last time Oregon lived up to their recruiting classes? Washington, they've always been good under Chris Petersen. And okay, great. That's true. But so you're giving him the benefit of the doubt to win the Pac-12 North because Washington and Oregon were basically in a dead heat in that poll, but you don't give the same benefit of the doubt to Washington State, which, consistently outperforms whatever you project. Is just, it's sort of weird to me that it seems like, and Utah, by the way, let's not even get started on Utah, which is always picked like up near the top of the Pac-12 South and finally last year won the Pac-12 South. It's like, I don't know. It's just weird to me that these narratives kind of get ingrained and, Washington State, they only win when they have a really whatever. It's like, no, dude, we just win right now.
Yeah. It's not, they're thinking back to, the 90s and like where there was cycles. WSU would cycle into having an 8-win, 9-win, 10-win team. But now it's just, we've talked about it. It's I think what you've said like in a podcast a couple of weeks ago is like the magic of Leach, where it's like, I mean, it's hard to think like they're going to win less than 8 games. Like, it's hard to think they're going to win less than 5 or 6 conference games. Like they've won 7, 2 of the last 3 years. They've won 6 all 4 of the last year. Like, all 4 straight years they've won at least 6 conference games. Like, what are they stepping back that much? Like, I mean, last year we thought they were stepping back. This year, where's the step back? You can say quarterback, but as important as the quarterback is in the air raid, all of us that follow it year to year, over and over again, know that the dip isn't that great. Like, especially when the talent around the quarterback, and you talked about with Costello, it's like, he lost a bunch of talent. Well, this, Gage Gabruder or whoever is the quarterback is inheriting a shit ton of talent.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
And, like, they're just not going to have to do much, and they get 2 patsy ass games to play, to get comfortable and maybe a third defense, like at least offensively a third.
Right. Yeah. I doubt Houston's defense is going to be any great shakes. Plus that game's going to be indoors. So
thank you for moving that game.
Yeah. Thank you for the air conditioning. We appreciate it.
But yeah, we'll get into that in a couple of weeks. But anyways, whatever, pick us 4th. That's fine. I don't care. Like, and WSU gets to hang it on their wall, and they get to be mad about it, and that's a part of playing at WSU, and
exactly.
And if once like, they should never pick us above 3rd, and never pick us above, whatever. So it's great, I don't care. Like
except for the one guy. Except for the one guy.
Yeah, I love you, man.
I'd like to buy that person a beer. It might be a woman. I'd like to buy that person a beer.
Yeah, buy that. I'm just playing the odds here, but
yeah,
it could be a woman. Yeah, but yeah, I do want to. I actually really do want to know who did that. We'll probably figure it out eventually. But just was like, WSU's winning the conference. And not even just the Pac-12 North.
No, they're winning the whole thing.
I mean, I hope they picked UW 4th, so it wasn't required that we had to win the Apple Cup to win.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Like, I just kind of want to say to them, I love this, but do you realize what that requires? Yeah. Like, well, and you know what?
What is it? What it has
go back to last season, though.
What it has required the last 3 years.
I know. We can get mad about last season all over again, though, and if we'd only beat USC, it wouldn't have required that. But whatever. Anyway, I think Leach had the best, by the way. This was the best quote from Leach. We didn't talk.
Which was regarding USC, of course.
No, this one was about where they get picked. So he says, look, I mean, I realize everyone thinks we're going to get our head kicked in as usual. I don't expect that to be the case any more than it was last year at this time when speculation was similar. Yeah, that's the great thing about us is every season, everybody thinks we're going to get our head kicked in. Then we don't. So everybody gets to be stunned and surprised. So it's fun for everybody. It's perfect. It's perfect.
He also said
it's more entertainment for all of us.
Someone, because apparently this will never die, asked about in reference to which we'll talk about in a second,
The
the officiating. So, but as a transition of that, Leach was asked about the USC officiating, and he said basically he didn't want to invest anymore into that. So shows a good answer. Oh, yeah. He was also asked about Deion McIntosh, and
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about him.
Yeah.
Am I? I don't know. Well, anyway, a guy that is recently on campus that we haven't practiced yet. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about him. I'd like to. But Coug fan did say earlier today that he's expected to be good to go. They just haven't updated the roster yet. So
yeah, well, the roster still had Jalen Thompson on it.
Yes,
they updated. So
yes.
They actually did an update like yesterday.
They did an update of numbers, is all they did.
Yeah, they did an update of numbers, but Jalen Thompson was on there. Renard Bell is single digits now. I think 9. Yeah, Gabe Mark's number.
Yeah.
But anyway, should
we take a moment to make fun of Chris Petersen?
Yeah, let's do that. So Chris Petersen in his media session was asked about the transfer portal, and actually I should probably get the exact quote if we're going to make fun of it. But he basically talked about he said that the players are.
Now we have to.
Let's just read the exact quote, because I don't want to misquote him.
Yeah, no, goodness, no. We don't want to be accused of, of being, like haters for the sake of being haters.
Yeah,
like we need the direct quote. Do you have it?
Yeah, I got it. So, I'm old school. I really am. What I mean by that is I just believe that there's a lot of hard things. Can I add an aw shucks? And
yes,
that we need
sure.
to
Aw
kind
shucks
of,
is okay.
And aw shucks that we need to kind of work through to get good things at the end of the process. I think sometimes the portal is good for kids to go in there if they want to. What does that even fucking mean?
I don't even know. No, that's well, I can tell you exactly what that is, but go ahead and finish the quote, and then I'll tell you what that is.
I think how this thing is heading, where guys to just transfers start to get free agency, heaven forbid. I don't think that's good. First and foremost, I don't think it's good for the kids. Everybody wants to talk about that. I've seen too many guys, including myself, have to work through hard things where maybe you tap out or it's easier. I'm going to go somewhere else. I think it's better. It's usually not. Yeah. Hey, I'm pretty sure that things are better at UW than at Boise, but I don't know. I just really believe that. So that's just kind of my feeling on that.
Yeah. I mean, they tap out, Okay, so should we go back really quick to what I think sometimes the portal is good for kids to go in there if they want to.
Oh,
you know what?
Yeah.
You know exactly what that is, right?
Because
that's his caveat. That's like, well, I'm starting a quarterback who transferred to me.
Yeah, he had to throw in that caveat.
Yeah.
But we're still going to make fun of you, dude, because we know why you threw in that caveat. Like, you think that you're safe from criticism because you throw that in, but you still said the part where what I mean by that is I just believe that there's a lot of hard things that we need to kind of work through to get good things at the end of that process. Wait, did Jacob Eason have to work through?
Yeah, who had his job? He had his job taken, and so rather than fighting back like a tough guy, he transferred.
He didn't come back the next year in Georgia camp and try to take back that job. No, he just transferred to a place where the senior quarterback has just left.
He tapped out. And now he's going to lead your football team.
Now Jacob Eason knows what his coach thinks of him.
I know. It's so like well, first of all, the open hypocrisy of Chris Petersen, Saint Pete over there. We've sort of made fun of before. His well-known rule of if you commit to Washington and you take a visit somewhere else, they'll pull your scholarship offer, versus if someone is committed somewhere else and they want to take a trip to Washington, he's totally okay with that. We've talked about the high hypocrisy of that one. He's just whatever, dude. He's like, everybody thinks he's, aw shucks, I'm old school. I really am. But it's just like, whatever, dude. You're the same as everybody else. Give me a break.
Yeah, it's
you're in it for you, like everyone else.
Yeah, just admit it, man. Just you don't have to be like this, aw shucks, no one, you didn't have to have an opinion on it. The part where he says like start to get free agency, which if you
Oh yeah, ooh, I don't think that's good.
Heaven forbid college athletes have agency in
Oh
any
no,
way.
goodness, heck no, no. Leach actually did have some comments on that. I'll see if I can find them really quick.
His were not.
They were pretty benign.
They're benign, not entirely different than Petersen's, but fairly benign. Okay, so great. I got it.
Okay, go ahead.
How are the transfers that are coming in looking? Oh no, I'm sorry. There's a lot of transfers.
Yeah, no, that's what he says. Yeah, he says far it hasn't hurt us. If we're not.
That's right. Yeah, so it's kind of a moving target. Hasn't hurt us. If we're not careful, that portal can become a free for all. But the funny thing is that the transfer portal wasn't like a new, like it was just. I mean, it was a way to make it easier for transfers and teams to find each other, but it didn't change the process of transfer.
And to keep everything above board. That was the whole point, was that people were like, so-and-so's tampering with my player. The whole, Ernie Kent, right? Valentine Izundu, Q Johnson situation, right? Where he was like, well, they're tampering with my guy. So this was supposed to eliminate that. Only what it's done is it's increased the number of transfers, which whatever. Some people don't like that. I think where they're having an issue is that more guys are getting immediately eligible than in the past. I think that's where it's starting to get it. But I do think it's interesting that Petersen frames it as, man, you got to be a tough guy. You got to work through some stuff. And it's a measure of your manhood. Leach, and it becomes more about the player, right? Like deficient, we've created a system that enables millennials, right? Like that's sort of the thing, right? And Leach is just sort of saying like, well, yes, but maybe it's creating some unintended consequences. He says, at some point we're going to have taking scholarships from somebody that doesn't have a good year and giving them to some walk-on that does, I imagine. And so he's sort of envisioning a system where people are basically having scholarships yanked and handed to other people because it becomes this free-for-all. He's sort of like, I think, more referencing the disorder of it. And I'm not saying that Leach isn't also, reasonably selfish about it, but his take is a little more, systemic, we're kind of creating this system of maybe chaos that we didn't want, versus Petersen being like, man, my guys are just leaving without, a problem. Leach even says like, I don't even think it's that big of a deal because the guys we've lost are guys who weren't going to play and, or guys who were problems who we needed to leave anyway. So, and I don't know, if you create a great place with competition, then, you're going to have some of that and whatever,
Yeah. And so, Leach, if we want to, so where you see Leach taking some of that like selfish, what's making it harder for him is one reporter asked about if a kid declares early for the draft, should they be able to come back if they go undrafted? And he said no, because I don't think it's a very Leach answer. I praise anyone who transcribes Leach.
It's pretty good.
No, because I don't think we don't just sit around here and try to build NFL teams. I don't know what that has to do with the question.
Yeah, that's weird.
I think the important thing is to build your college team. And so this is where it really, either a guy is playing college or he's playing in the NFL. Make up your mind. That's what I think. Obviously, it's a very much a non-answer. But
he's like, either you're on the boat or you're not, and that's a very typical college coach answer for sure.
Yeah. But he obviously like he wants to know who's going to be on his team or whatever, and that's where coaches just got to admit when they just don't want things to be harder for them.
Yeah, I wish they would just say that, right? Like just say, hey, look, man. And I know they won't, and I know why they won't. And all those things, like I get it. Like they'd get, shredded if they did, but I just wish just one time a coach would be like, hey, listen, man, I'm trying to build a winning football team here. And that makes it harder. It's like, I just wish they would just say what it is instead of like coming up with contrived answers that I'm sure they believe, by the way. I'm sure Chris Petersen believes what he says. Like, I'm not calling him a liar. I'm just saying like, you know, I mean, like, think about what you're saying and think about how that fits with your actions. And, you know, I mean, get over yourself just a little bit.
Right. So we also had the opportunity today to hear from fearless Pac-12 leader Larry Scott.
Yeah.
Who we just love here on the podcast. Just our favorite.
It's one of our favorites for sure.
Yeah. And so, Jeff, I know that you dug into his transcript a little more than I did. Now I'm not seeing it on there like I did earlier. So some of the big things he was asked about, including the TV deal, the revenue. The Pac-12 has fallen behind quite a bit from the Big Ten and the SEC, particularly in team revenue. Kind of what his excuse was that the Pac-12 is they just signed their deal too early, and that we'll kind of have to wait till 2024 for that to catch back up.
I mean, I think there's some truth to that, because I do actually think there is some sequencing to it, right? Like if you sign a media deal, you know, 1 year, and then, you know, 2 or 3 years later, somebody else signs theirs. I mean, it's going to be bigger, right? So, I mean, I don't think he's being totally disingenuous with that, but of course, you know, we know that, you know, the Pac-12 is just a less desirable property as a conference than you know, most of the other conferences out there. So, you know, he's probably right about that. The one thing that he did do was just basically say, like, yeah, we're going to catch up the next time we hold all of our media rights, which is a very clear reference to them owning the Pac-12 networks versus, you know, when the SEC or the Big Ten or whatever, you know, whenever their media rights come up, they don't, like the Big Ten in particular, that's a pretty comparable one.
Right.
They don't own the Big Ten network. Like that's mostly, I think either mostly or half-ish owned by Fox. Right. So there's that piece. And so they may not be able to maximize stuff. And he made reference to, you know, some properties in some conferences being, you know, sort of under contract until 2035, and how, you know, they're able to maybe do some things sooner because they own all of it. So I don't know. All I know is it turned up this amazing quote, which I'm going to read and you can marvel at. Okay. So here we go. He says, and he was speaking of the sort of the next negotiation. So here's what he said. Overall, when it comes to media, I think we're all noticing there's an unprecedented shift occurring in the media landscape and in consumer habits. While this creates uncertainty, it also creates tremendous opportunity. And because we own and control all of our media rights and have all of our rights coming up in 2024, we continue to feel very good about how we're positioned for the future. While we recognize during these changing times and paradigm shifts, we've faced headwinds on distribution with the Pac-12 networks. As a whole, when it comes to media, we've got strategic patience, and we're going to be able to take advantage of these positive media trends, new players in the marketplace, and the increasing value that we see in our rights, especially as these new players from technology and media come in and are aggressively bidding for sports rights. And I want to point out that that was not off of a script. He actually said that in response to a question.
Incredible. That's so. In my time as a journalist covering business software, like, you know, you have your meetings with certain people, and whenever you got higher up the chain, you could tell the media training was far more advanced, and you would just get these incredible answers to like that are very much like totally on message answers, even when they had no idea the question you were asking.
Right.
Like, and who knows, I don't know what question he was asked there. Who knows if he was answering it at all. But whenever he used a phrase like paradigm shift or something,
right,
you know, someone's just bullshitting. And, you know, facing headwinds with distribution rights, which of course means we couldn't sign a deal with DirecTV.
Couldn't get a deal done. But it's like, it's always constantly framed as something that was outside of his control, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was outside of his control that DirecTV, even though he was, you know, right in there negotiating it.
Right.
but yeah, so the largest TV provider in the U.S. they couldn't
couldn't get them done because of headwinds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Headwinds. I like to cycle, and a headwind can be a pain in the ass.
That is true. It can be. When I've been running, there are times when I'm running and I'm like, why the hell is this wind blowing right in my face? But
yeah.
There's that. So he said that, and I don't think he's totally wrong in the sense that, owning all of their properties does give them, maybe some leverage and flexibility to create a better deal. But, it sounds like an awful lot like he's banking on someone like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or somebody to jump in there with some streaming rights, and really pay for that. I don't know. I'm no media expert, but that seems it seems like they're throwing a lot of eggs into that one basket.
Also, are we really thinking the money from those streaming rights for like Netflix and Hulu are going to compare to what ESPN and Fox are paying?
I mean, he's banking on things being different in like 3 years when they're negotiating this, which, man, I don't know. That seems, it really, like the visual that goes with what he said is somebody standing there with both fingers crossed, like just standing there. And that's, I hope it's different in 3 years.
So that's the thing is like his is the assumption in like 5 years that those new deals will be bigger than what the SEC or whatever has in place until 2035. But like, so you still have another 10 years where the SEC might still be raking in that giant money, and it probably at that point will have become a very bad deal for ESPN or Fox or whoever. Like I mean, that's probably almost a guarantee it's going to be a bad deal in the future. With the more things for people to watch, like college football, I think we've reached the kind of peak of the value on the contracts. And so if Larry is hoping that in 5 years that he's getting that bigger money, I just don't see it coming.
Well, and not only that, but I think the SEC's deal is coming up before ours.
Oh, okay.
And then they're actually working on it now. And everybody agrees the SEC is severely underpaid right now. And so the deal that they sign is going to be absolutely batshit crazy. And what's interesting there to me is that, the money that these broadcasting partners pay for live sports properties, right? It's not necessarily a zero-sum game, but it kind of is, right? Like if they're given, billions of dollars to the SEC, that's less money to pay the Pac-12, right? At least in theory, that they've got a certain budget or a certain number that they're not going to go above when it comes to, paying for college sports broadcast rights. So I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting. That the SEC deal that's coming is going to be absolutely just crazy. And it's going to be interesting to see.
One of the things I saw in Larry's quotes is he again, like, referenced that, we win more than any other conferences on the whole. It's like, that shit doesn't matter with the TV rights. It doesn't matter at all.
Right.
Like, no one cares if you're winning water polo championships. Yes, someone cares, but I'm talking in terms of TV rights. No one's searching for the Stanford water polo TV rights.
Right.
Like, it doesn't, like, stop doing that. Like, we're not idiots. Like, stop with the Conference of Champions bullshit. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, when was the last time you won a championship in basketball or football?
Right.
Those in basketball is dwarfs in comparison to football when it comes to money. You haven't had a college football playoff team in 3 years. You haven't, like, since Chip Kelly left Oregon, or even, in the wake of that, like, it hasn't been a regular thing. So it's, if the SEC, the SEC can get that big contract, but the Pac-12 just doesn't have the brand capital is kind of a term we use now.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't have it. Like,
right.
and the individual teams don't have it, especially when USC isn't there to, right, like as Bill Moose would say, like a rising tide lifts all boats, like what he would say with the WSU football team. But that's really the case with the Pac-12. When the USC sucks, no one gives a fuck about the Pac-12. Like, that's the problem,
And I don't know if that's going to change before the deal's not up till 2024 or 2025.
Yeah, it's 2024, I think.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know how much you can change that between now and then. Maybe if you win like 3 of the next 5, CFP championships or something, but like, I'm serious. Like what, let's just like spitball for a sec. What would it take to really, really, truly significantly change the brand capital, as you referred to it, of the Pac-12 such that ESPN, Fox, whoever is going to, dump a truckload of money on the conference? Like, what would it take in the next 5 years?
It would definitely take something like you said, like 3 titles. Like it wouldn't be even just be like UW or whoever like sneaking in and winning a title like once. Like it would have to be, and it would probably be most beneficial if it was USC being the best team, or UCLA probably. But
you've got to get eyeballs.
Yeah,
right. It's about eyeballs, and so you not only have to be successful, but you have to be successful to the point that eyeballs are coming there. And maybe if you can show some sort of extreme upward trend in that, but other than that, I think they are already screwed for this next thing. Like they're already screwed.
Oh yeah, there's not enough time, and that's not even considering the basketball portion of this, where the Pac-12 basketball has completely lost like all of its street cred, or it's just had a few years of horrible, to the point where you're flirting with being a 1-bid league, and so like there's just nothing about the Pac-12 brand that anyone outside of the Conference of Champions, Bill Walton rhetoric, like really gives a shit about. It's Oregon needs to go beat Auburn, and Oregon probably then needs to stay in the playoff conversation to the point where other teams can beat them, or they can beat other teams and stay in it. Because and actually, in his interview with Mike Yaman, Yogi Roth, he directly pointed to Washington and Auburn last year, kind of like set the entire season off on like a bad note, because suddenly every single game becomes less important. And the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 plays 9 conference games, they have less opportunity to schedule games like that. And there's less incentive too, because like you really want to put your players through another game like that, another like peer game, I guess, with your peers, but like or like Larry Scott talked about, like that he said in some other games, but really it was Washington and Auburn that kind of set things off, because it kind of eliminated UW from the playoff talk like almost immediately.
Yep.
Especially after Auburn just kept losing, and so that it's the same thing. Like it's funny, like what Auburn was a 6-6 team or whatever last year, and we're coming in like the Pac-12 is just hoping that our golden child this year can go beat them like in a neutral site, which is actually way more of a neutral site than Washington got last year, which wasn't a neutral site at all.
No, not at all. And Larry Scott did talk about, somebody did ask him again about the 9 conference games, and he reiterated there's no appetite to go to 8. So, which my guess is, my suspicion on that is that is 100% tied to gate for the teams, and not paying payouts to a 4th non-conference opponent, and the ability to attract. So like, if you're Wazoo, right, you have a hard time getting, a decent team to come into Martin Stadium. Right. So, if you can't get, and the theory is right, that you schedule a mid-level Power 5 team is that fourth non-conference game, right? To sort of replace the conference game, except that if you win the game, it doesn't mean that someone in your conference has now lost a game, right? So everybody gets, a chance to basically add one more win to the total. My suspicion is that the CEOs and the ADs, the presidents, right? The presidents, chancellors, and the ADs are just sort of like, I don't think we want to try and schedule that fourth game. I don't think we want to try and negotiate payouts. I think we would rather just have another conference opponent, and the gate that comes along with the sale of those season tickets, et cetera. Although, it would guarantee another home game in theory anyway. So I don't know. I'm guessing that's where it's coming from, that they don't want to go to 8. But maybe someday.
Well, I would think that a school like WSU wouldn't want to go to 8 because WSU is not going to schedule a better opponent with that.
Right.
They're not going to schedule. I mean, me as a season ticket holder, I don't want another non-conference bullshit home game. Like it's enough to have Northern Colorado and New Mexico State. Like that's fine. Like, or that one year we had 5 in a row and it just was like just crap. Well, there was a Boise State game mixed in there, so you can get that occasional. But WSU just hasn't been able to land any good home and homes in a long time, and so that not even the mid-level Big 10 or Big 12 teams. So I have no confidence that they could do that. So from my perspective, I'm like, I'd rather have UCLA come in more often and USC come in more often. That's more interesting to me. That's beneficial to us. Now, a team like UW or Oregon or USC who can actually bring in great home and homes, and USC obviously has Notre Dame every single year, and Stanford too. But they can schedule those good home and home matchups that we can't. So I could see from their perspective, we can still get a good opponent in there, but we can pick that opponent rather than, and so that would help maybe the conference overall. Of course, you have to win the games, but that's another story.
Yeah. Other things Larry Scott talked about, he confirmed that they were looking for a potential equity partner. So I think that's the first time anybody's commented publicly on that one. They did announce the Vegas Bowl, which is going to be the number 3 bowl behind the Alamo Bowl and the Rose Bowl. So that's cool. And even as we've been recording here, they announced the Los Angeles Bowl, which is going to be against the Mountain West. So we kind of knew that was coming. And he said the rest of the bowl lineup,
which is kind of a bummer opponent for the Los Angeles.
I'm kind of bummed out that's not like a better bowl game, but whatever, I guess. And then the other thing he talked about, the big thing he talked about was officiating. So, I wrote a pretty lengthy story on that. The big takeaways from that were that the officials were sort of adequately trained or inadequately trained. The supervisors above them were inadequate. The grading they were doing was inadequate. The recruiting they were doing was inadequate. So there was all that. I think the big thing is, and I think this is a good thing, so maybe we can start off here. One of the big changes they're going to make is that now targeting calls are going to be reviewed by one person. The supervisor of replay officials is going to review all the targeting calls, which I think is a great move, because at least you should get some consistency, right? I mean, if it's the same guy, and I assume it's a guy, same guy making the decisions game to game and week to week, he can go, well, last week I called something like this, not targeting. This week I'm gonna, you know what I mean? It's like we're not dealing with 100 different interpretations of a very vague rule. And I think that's actually a really good move, and something that, I think other leagues have shown when you have kind of a centralized review center for certain things, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing.
Right. Yeah. So, that works. Of course, Larry Scott had a much more positive
he did.
Spin onto, he basically said, everything's fine. We're just as good as everyone else.
Yeah.
But then when you dug into the report as you did, and then you shared some of that stuff with me, there was not. Not everything was fine. There's a lot of things that you can improve on.
No, this is fine. The house is burning meme, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, in all, they did say, the Pac-12 did say they were going to accept all the recommendations that were in the review. So that's good, right? Like, and there was some transparency here too. I mean, obviously I think it's probably pretty likely that the Pac-12 had sort of a hand in crafting the report, the executive summary of the report. But this is the sort of thing that they would not have made public in the past. They are pretty infamous for being pretty secretive. And so to make the executive summary, some of which is not flattering. I mean, let's be real. It's not flattering at all. I mean, there's some of these things like hiring and recruiting. Quote, the Pac-12 is the only Power 5 conference without an affiliated Group of 5 recruiting and training partner for officiating, often called a pipeline, which is a major weakness. And then it's things like the clinic does not provide the officials with sufficient training, and then officials do not have adequate personnel resources with whom to consult at the Pac-12 regarding rules and mechanics. And then, this is my favorite one. This is by far my favorite one. The current ranking system of officials is too dependent on subjective measures. Fitness is overemphasized in the evaluation of the officials. I'm just like, wait a second. We're like grading our officials based on fitness and not whether they actually make calls correctly. Like, I'm just. But anyway,
there's
a whole bunch
football
of stuff
field. There's like the back judge, or maybe like there's a couple guys that maybe have to run, but most of them don't have to. Like
that big of a deal? I mean, is that the most important thing, or is the more important thing to get the calls correct and know your rules?
Yeah, exactly. Which we've seen them get confused about in the past, such as some clear targeting.
Yeah,
rules. But
the big conclusion was this: an intentional increase in turnover may lead to an enhanced recruitment of high quality talent, which sounds like to me like you need to fire some of your officials.
Exactly, that's what they're saying. Like, get rid of these guys. But Larry Scott says everything's fine. That's what they're. So we're being. He said in his interview with Roth and Yam, he's just like, we're being transparent because that's what we have to be these days.
Yeah, they're going to kill us if we're not transparent. I don't know. They did say they would take all the recommendations. So this was one. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if they actually do follow through. And look, the reality is on all these things too, it's going to be years before we see, before we really see the fruits of this stuff. So, most of it, I think the replay targeting stuff that should improve immediately. But the rest of it, I mean, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, if we're talking about recruitment and training and whatever, I mean, it's, and turning over officials, I mean, that's stuff that takes years. So, who knows if they'll actually do it? Who knows if it'll get better? They could say, oh yeah, we're totally doing it. And 3 years later, they still suck. And we just go, whatever. I mean, it's, so that was the gist of what Larry Scott covered though.
Yeah. And then, Pac-12 championship game is moving to Las Vegas in 2020,
which we all knew was highly likely, right?
Yeah. Well, it was initially reported that it would be in LA in 2020.
Yeah, that was like 2 nights ago.
But it's 2020 and 2020. It's going to Las Vegas. I'm sure it'll stay there. I don't think it'll move.
It makes the most sense for it to stay there.
I mean, the conference tournament's been more successful there than it was in LA. I think, maybe not having it on Friday at 5 p.m. would be helpful.
Yeah.
But in Vegas, that would matter less.
Way less.
But
way less.
Way less than in the freaking Bay Area.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you can actually get to things in Vegas.
Well,
and they have
plus,
a billion taxis and Ubers and whatever.
Plus, like, if people are going in to go to the game in Vegas, and they're probably going to be staying on the Strip, and it's going to be, it's funny. I think I saw Larry Scott or someone said like, the stadium's going to be close to the airport. I'm like, everything's close to the airport in Las Vegas.
That's true.
Like that's the beauty of Las Vegas.
It
Like
is
you
true.
just get in the car and you're there. Like it's not like they that's like one of that they're in San Diego. It's like the
Yeah.
closest airport to the actual area of the city you're going to.
Yeah.
But yeah,
This
so that's good.
This should make it infinitely easier to go on a moment's notice, though. I mean, it really should.
Yeah, so many. I mean, there's a ton of flights into the Bay Area, obviously, but Vegas is just much easier to find hotels, much easier to find everything. Like it's gonna be and probably a much more exciting trip than going to Santa Clara.
Heck yeah.
Because they would say Bay Area, but you weren't in San Francisco. You were in Santa Clara. Like if you were staying in San Francisco, you were traveling a long way to get to
driving a long way to the game. And it's so I think the only potential downside is that the loser of the game could potentially end up right back in the Las Vegas Bowl. So I think that's
very,
probably
very likely.
Yeah, I mean, we would hope it wouldn't be likely, but I mean, it's obviously possible.
But it would have happened this year.
Yes, it would have. It would have. Yeah, Utah, that's true.
What was the third bowl this year? Holiday Bowl.
On the bright side, like on the good side, then you just go, but you're going back to Vegas, and does anybody really need their arm twisted to go to Vegas twice in a month?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, especially, a lot of the conference has a very easy trip to Vegas. A lot of the conference can drive to Vegas.
Right.
You're talking Utah, LA schools, Arizona schools.
Yep, that's true.
All very
for
close.
them. It's like a drive to Pullman for us for a lot of them. So
Yep.
So that's good. So that's all good. That's a good move by the conference. Finally fixing that problem. So yeah. Anything else we're missing? Larry Scott?
No, I think we're good. We've picked on him enough. We've picked
Yeah.
But it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all
bad. It's true.
I think that the bowl lineup will be way better once we get upgraded Las Vegas Bowl and upgrade. Like I think because like right now having Alamo Bowl and then down to Holiday Bowl, like you got it kind of feels like at this point for a lot of the schools, like the Holiday Bowl, as great as it is, like has gotten a little stale, and especially since the Qual or whatever the stadium's called now is a piece of crap, like just a giant piece of crap. Like when I went there in the first Holiday Bowl that we went to against Minnesota, or not the first, but the first recently, like it was just like you after all the like you're like, Martin Stadium is way nicer than this. Like everywhere is nicer than this. Like what is this dump? Like and it kind of had to move down the list because of that. Even though San Diego is still a great place to go to a bowl game, but yeah. So you move it down, then you maybe get a different set of teams are going and whatever. But yeah. So I think we've recapped Pac-12 Media Day enough. Like. Who knew you could talk an hour and 15 minutes?
Look at that. See, nonsense. They're laughing at us. We started the podcast saying it's useless, and we just talked about it for over an hour.
Yep. So, yeah. I don't know. I think that's probably pretty good. We can probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
Usually we talk about by kids or whatever.
Yeah.
I rode STP. I did 200 plus miles of bike riding.
Yeah, you did.
I got back on the bike for the first time today, so that was my...
That's
big
good
thing. Yeah.
Way to go.
My butt had healed finally. So
finally.
Yeah.
Your poor butt.
My poor butt. 200 miles on a bike seat, not fun.
No
but
fun.
Yeah, so it's my life.
Yeah.
You're living your summer.
That's right. I'm busy. Yeah, my summers these days have just become a series of house projects. We're in the middle of having our pool redone, and we also are painting our house. So I spent yesterday reinforcing my deck, and I spent 4 hours drilling screws into my old deck, which had been put together with nails. And that was not going so great lately. So yeah, now as soon as we're done recording, I'm going to probably head outside to do some caulking. Yeah.
I'm going to get ready to head to soccer match, as
That sounds more fun.
go to quite a lot, and drink all the free Coors I can.
And that's a lot, actually.
Yeah, you can drink a lot of free Coors.
Coming next week on Podcast
Drink it as
versus
cold
Everyone,
as possible.
how much cold Coors Light did Craig drink at the Tacoma Defiance? We're definitely going to answer that next week.
It probably won't be a disappointingly low number.
No. What else should we tell them? Hey, subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe. Please subscribe. We love the subscriptions.
If you can give us a 5-star review, that helps other people find us. That's cool. If you don't want to give us a 5-star review, screw you.
Yeah, please give us a 5-star review, or just don't review us.
Yeah, I think that's the.
But just give us a 5-star review out of a favor, just a favor to us.
Yeah, I promise we will make it up to you in some completely undefined way in the future. At some completely undefined time.
Thank you, all of you who have seamlessly made the transition to the new podcast feed.
Yeah. If you have questions, you can send us emails.
Yeah, I haven't checked it in a week or two.
It's called Pod versus Everyone, Pod vs Everyone, or is it Podcast vs Everyone?
It's the whole thing. Podcast.
Okay, Podcast vs Everyone at gmail.com. Yeah, send us an email. Find us on Twitter. That one is Pod vs Everyone. And I think that's everything.
Yeah. Thanks,
there
guys. I mean, it's almost camp time. I think we'll have one more nonsense podcast and they'll be ready to go.
Hooray! All right, Craig. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.